Your life doesn't change overnight. It changes with what you do every day. Daily habits shape your mindset, energy, and success. By understanding why they matter, what actions make the biggest impact, and how to build them into your routine, you can create lasting change that completely transform your life. You will understand why these habits are so powerful, what specific actions create real change, and how to build them into your routine without feeling overwhelmed. 1. Wake up with purpose. Every morning presents you with an unspoken test, testing your love, warmth, sleep, and the allure of slumber's remaining strands. It isn't sensational, not of the fight people will witness, that it is the most important one of your day. The instant you open your eyes, you're presented with two choices. Roll over and sleep the day away with fuzzy plans, or get up with a silent flame that whispers to you, I am here to define this day, not let it define me. That decision, seemingly small, is where the magic starts. The fact is, too many days get away from us before they've even really started. You wake up with your head cloudy, already exhausted, and there's no passion behind your actions. You wait, you procrastinate as if time is in your debts, but time isn't waiting. It never did. It rewards those who seize it. Those who rise up before their excuses have a chance to take hold. So what if the first thing on your mind wasn't how to remain comfortable, but how to keep going? What if your waking idea was, how can I win today? This is not about sweeping gestures. It begins with a quiet one. Being clear of intention before you even get out of bed. Whisper it if you have to. Today, I move with intention. Today, I live my life, not trail behind. These are your bearings, drawing your mind out of lethargy and into action. You're no longer a passenger. You're the driver, and that small change is all. Now, picture this. Waking up with that attitude, not once, not sometimes, but every single morning. You splash cold water on your face, not to wake yourself up, but to remember you're alive. You're here. Today's a blank page waiting for your sign. You lace your boots not to go for a stroll, but to march toward your dreams. And when you go outside, the world is different, not because the world has changed, but because you have. Consider what you become when you live that way. Not only are you someone who gets things done, but you're someone with presence, someone who understands why they exist and what they're pursuing. You become the type of person others look up to, not because you're loudmouthed, but because you are anchored. You become a storm of clarity and a sea of drift. But this isn't magic power. It isn't waiting for inspiration or for some ideal morning. It's the result of choosing over and over to take control of your time, to greet the dawn as a barrier, not a wanderer. It's the result of understanding that how you begin your day is how you're conditioning yourself to live. So if you wake up without purpose, you condition yourself to drift. But if you wake up with purpose, you condition yourself to lead. Ask yourself this. Why let the day run you around when you can pull it towards you? Why let past habits define your future when you possess the power to define it yourself? The sun doesn't dawn for the sake of habit, rises as a remember of fresh opportunity. And every time it does, it's giving you one thing, a decision, not later, not someday. But now the morning is not the start of the day. It is the testing ground of your character. And when you approach it as such, when you wake up with purpose, rather than distraction, you start to change everything. The world might still slumber as you stand, but you'll feel it in your bones. Today you chose to lead, to speak to yourself as a friend. There's a voice inside you that no one else hears, yet it follows you everywhere. It's with you in quiet moments, in the rush of your day, and even in your dreams. But here's the quiet tragedy. Most people let that voice become their harshest critic, a relentless judge whispering doubt and disappointment at every turn. You tell yourself things you'd never have the courage to say to a person you care about. You tell yourself you're not worthy, not strong, not smart, not good enough. And you begin to believe it. That internal dialogue becomes the filter through which you view your life. But pause and consider this. Why is it that you are so eager to show others kindness, patience, and compassion, but withhold the same understanding from yourself? Why are you so eager to empathize with the struggles of a friend, but so reluctant to give space to your own humaneness? The truth is, being human is about stumbling, tripping, and attempting again. But somewhere in the process, you began to treat your flaws like offenses instead of what if for one day you communicated with yourself the way you would with someone you loved? What if when you messed up you said it's okay, you're learning, get up, try again, rather than attaching yourself? This has nothing to do with ego or hollow affirmation. It has nothing to do with acting out as if you were perfect. This has everything to do with fairness. Fairness is extending to yourself the same kindness you extend to others, the same benefit of doubt, the same urging to get up and keep trying when the going gets tough. You start this transformation by hearing more clearly in your own head. Not to follow it mindlessly, but to notice when it's turned against you. When that voice begins to tell you you're a failure, worthless, hopeless, you don't shut it up with deceptions. You fill it with truth. You tell yourself, no, I'm not perfect, but I'm doing my best. I'm not there yet, but I'm not where I began. You give yourself a second chance. This is not a practice that weakens you. It makes you complete when you treat yourself kind. When you learn to give yourself words of and encouragement instead of destruction. You start to stand taller. You start walking with confidence, not arrogance, but quiet confidence. Imagine entering a room with your head held high because someone else did not give you permission to, but because you decided to believe in your value without requiring anyone else's approval. And what if you lived daily like that? What would it be like to become your own supporter in earnest? To be the single person in your life who does not leave you when things are not working? Consider how your reality could shift if your inner dialogue was not your most critical voice, but your most enthusiastic advocate. The thing is, words matter. The things you say to yourself translate into everything you do. How you work, how you love, how you dream. You can't construct a strong life on a foundation of ongoing self-destruction, but you can construct one out of ingratitude, earnestness, and grace. That ain't weakness, that's resilience. So listen carefully to that voice within. And when it does speak, pick your words wisely, because the most significant words you will ever hear are not those of a teacher, a parent, or a partner. Here are the ones you whisper to yourself when others don't hear. Make them meaningful, make them gracious, make them real. 3. Keep a small daily promise. Big dreams awaken the heart. They spark images of a tomorrow full of success, excellence, and change, but dreams are tenuous things. Without a solid base, they crumble. Not because there is no passion, but because there is no framework. The reality is, your life is not forged in flashes of inspiration. It is forged gradually, methodically, by the gentle repetition of small conscious acts. Fireworks are dazzling, but they last for seconds. What remains is the quiet flame you nurture daily. Quit, steadfast, relentless. It starts with something basic, something mundane. Make your bed every morning. Write one authentic sentence in a notebook. Sit quietly for 5 minutes before the world starts yelling. These are not big movements. These are not headline-grabbing acts, but they are holy because they are an offering, a vow between you and you. And that is where real growth takes root. You might think these small actions are insignificant, but the reality is that they are everything. When you do what you say you're going to do, no matter how small, you start to rewrite the narrative you carry with you about who you are. You cease to view yourself as flighty, flaky, or untrustworthy. You become someone who arrives, who keeps commitments, who keeps their word. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up. Take the fellow who polishes his shoes each evening before retiring. No one will ever praise them. No one will even see, but he does. That little ritual performed in the stillness of night is more than mere routine. It is a mirror. It reflects organization, purpose, and concern. It reminds him that he is a person who pays attention to detail, who values routine, who can trust himself. That counts. Not because it's seen, but because it builds something unseen. Character, these are not flashy habits. They don't scream. They whisper. They require your persistence, not your approval. And at first they will be nothing, just a couple of minutes, just a little effort. But if you persist, if you keep that spark burning day after day, those moments start to pile up. Gently, they become a life. And not just any life, but one that's defined by your own purpose. And so I want you to ask yourself, what is one thing that you might promise yourself today? Not a big goal, but something tiny, something doable. And then ask, would you honor it? Even when nobody's looking, even when you're tired, frustrated, or bored. Because that's the true test. Your habits aren't built in spurts of motivation, but in struggles with resistance. You see, it's never about the promise being big or small. It's about the gravidity of your word. When you start respecting your own word as sacred, everything shifts. You no longer look for the world to reward you. You move from the inside out, and the world starts responding quietly at first, then unmistakably. So let your dreams stay. Let them smolder hot on the horizon, but ground them with something tiny, something hard. Make one promise to yourself today. Then keep it again tomorrow. Gradually, that quiet persistence will construct something enormous. Not because of the strength of will, but because of the faith you rebuild in yourself. One small act at a time. Or walk into discomfort. Most live in violent oblivion. But not oblivion, systematically sawdusting anything that would make them sweat, trip, or stretch. They dance around difficulty as if a gun itself was a wild beast. But comfort is deception. It vows security and brings status. The ones who stand. The ones who are not forgotten, they understand this. They do not recoil when life tightens its hold. They lean in. They seek the very things others fear, not that they like to suffer, but because they know that growth hides behind discomfort. Discomfort isn't your enemy. It isn't a red flag or a warning to turn back. It's an invitation, a call to grow. It comes in many guises: an awkward pause, a missed attempt, a difficult choice, a heavy reality. It presents itself as pain, but it has a mission. When you embrace that, when you quit trying to escape it, you start changing. You become a person who leans toward resistance instead of away from it. And in doing so, you find fortitude you never knew you possesses. Imagine the slap of cold morning air. Most people clamp the door shut tighter, hit snooze, pull the blankets up to their chin. But then there is someone else. Someone who opens the door and goes out. Burning lungs, stinging skin, they walk, they move, they take deep breaths. That cold does not debilitate them. It revives them. The pain that everyone else ran from becomes fuel. That is the difference between a life of resignation and a life of fire with passion. You were not created to solve by avoiding difficulties. You were constructed for pressure, refined for adversity. Your own biology is evidence. Muscles develop through resistance. Lungs become stronger through effort. Minds get sharper through struggle. And yet your tendency is to view resistance as something to be avoided. You avoid the tough conversation, stall on the tough choices, and seek shortcuts through the terrain that is intended to mold you. Begin by questioning what you have been avoiding. Is it a truth you wish to avoid, a risk you fear to take, a dream you keep postponing because the path leading to it seems steep and unyielding? The answers will not be easy, but they will be honest. And that is what counts. Discomfort is never arbitrary. It indicates the areas where growth is in store, where your strength remains latent. What if rather than avoiding discomfort, you will come to it? As a teacher, one with calloused hands, perhaps, and a bark instead of a gentle voice, but a teacher nonetheless. What if every instance of resistance was really a lesson in becoming more brave, more resilient, more alive? The people who get up don't have fear or fears or easier roads. They just stop fleeing what's difficult. They go in and they emerge different. Each day presents you with this decision to remain where it's familiar and warm, or to move into something that shakes your hands and quickens your heart. It doesn't have to be a great jump. Whatever it is, lean in. Get the lump in your throat. Let the fire burn in your stomach. That's how you hone yourself, not by theory or desire, but by action. Growth doesn't happen from being comfortable. It happens from going where it's uncomfortable and doing it anyway. And eventually, what used to make you anxious will feel second nature. Because discomfort never persists, but the resilience it builds does. 5. Write down your thoughts. A messy mind is heavier than any load you can carry in your hands. It blinds you to your perception of the world like a dirty window making everything fuzzy and unbetterment. You attempt to reason clearly, happens to push on, yet the chaos within your head makes each step more difficult than it must be. Choices become daunting, emotions erratic, and even the smallest tasks begin to feel insurmountable. You're not broken. You're just buried. Underneath the chaos is clarity, serenity, and concentration. And one of the easiest ways to get there is this. Grab a pen and begin writing. It's nothing glamorous. You don't have to be a writer. You don't have to get the exact words or care what it sounds like. It's not about performance, about honesty. It's about all the mess that's in your head and trying to give it a place to land. Because when your thoughts remain in your head, they churn. They reverberate and replay and turn themselves into knots. But when you write them out, something breaks. The storm slows down. The clouds start to part. Take 5 minutes, that's all. 5 quiet minutes in the start of your day, or finish, or both. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What's bothering me? What's giving me hope? What am I trying to push away? Don't criticize your answers. Don't censor them. Just let the words spill out, even if they don't make sense. Even when you repeat the same sentence over and over, because that's all that will come out, let it be. Because once it's on the page, you start to look at it differently. You're no longer just the person living the experience, but the person watching it. That change from being in the midst of the chaos to standing just outside of it gives you something strong. Perspective. You see the loops you've been stuck in. You notice the patterns you've been missing. You even glimpse the answers you believed were concealed, but sat there the entire time waiting to be discovered. Journaling isn't about getting everything figured out in one sitting. It's about making space. A space where you can be honest without reprisal, raw without vulnerability. In a world that is always calling for performance and polish, this intimate space becomes holy. It's yours and you only. A reflection, not only of what is happening to you, but of how you are reacting. That reflection is transformative. As time passes, you'll also notice something else. Writing doesn't only declutter your mind. It lifts your spirit. The weight in your chest begins to lift. Your sleep gets deeper. Your choices come more quickly. You don't snap as quickly. You don't spin as hard. You start to respond from a place of centered awareness rather than emotional reactivity. You become an effect more yourself. This habit might appear insignificant, but don't dismiss it. The world's brilliant minds, artists, philosophers, inventors, leaders, they all wrote journals. Not for praise, not for others to see, but for the sake of their own sanity and clarity. They knew that the page was able to hold things. The mind wasn't supposed to bear by itself. You don't require a leather-bound book or some costly pen. A piece of paper will suffice. The magic is not in the materials. It's in the moment that you choose to confront your thoughts instead of running from. When you write, you're not merely noting. You're unshaped to the formless and calm to the agitated. So the next time your mind is loud, your heart is heavy, or your day is knotted, write 5 minutes. Just you, the page, and the truth. You'll be amazed at what spews forth. And you will definitely be altered by what you read. 6. Choose one thing and finish it. Each morning meets you with a dozen open doors. Doors to do, to make, to mend, or to complete. Yet most do not step through any of them with confidence. They linger, they dabble. They take a few tentative steps into one room, look into another, and then retreat, burdened by self-doubt, distraction, or the terror that they chose the wrong door. This is how frustration creeps in. Not because you don't have potential, but because you never give any route the time or attention it has to reveal its value. And so the day passes, leaving a trail of half-done tasks and half-lived endeavors. If you want clarity, if you want direction, if you want the kind of confidence that does not tremble with each new challenge, then you must do something radical in its simplicity. Decide on one thing and complete it. It needn't be monumental. It doesn't need to be a headline grabber or a show-off. It may be tidying up your tool shed, answering the message you've been ignorant for, aging, mending the coat that's been lying on your seat for weeks. The point isn't the magnitude of the task. It's the action of taking it to finish. Finishing, real finishing, is a discipline, a limited one. And like all disciplines, the more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. You can't develop that muscle by leaping from one thought to the next. The beginning is simple. The beginning is accelerating. It's like movement, but actual movement isn't in the beginning. It's in the finish. In closing the loop, in walking all the way through one door before seeking another. Complexion becomes a source of inner strength, a quiet but formidable source of ingridity. When you say, "I'll do this," and you follow through, you're not murmuring. Making a promise to the world, you're making a promise to yourself. And nothing reprograms your identity quicker than that. Because once you begin proving to yourself that you see things through, everything is different. Your words mean more, not only to others, but to you. You start moving differently. You hesitate less. Decisions become simpler. You second guess less because you're no longer making moves out of uncertainty. You've learned, you move, and moving leads to finish, and finish leads to confidence. It becomes a loop of progress. Picture what your life would be like if you woke up every day, knowing, down to your very bones, that if you begin something, you will complete it. That your time will not go to waste. Your energy will not be frittered, and your intentions will not thin out. How much more courageously would you live? How much more liberally would you create? If you believed in yourself not merely to start, but to see it through, you must confront what's incomplete. Ask yourself truthfully, what have I left dangling? What chores, commitments, or projects have I dropped? Not because they weren't worth pursuing, but because distraction or self-doubt snuck in and stole the show. Something in your life that is waiting to be finished. Something that originally meant enough to you for you to start. Clean off the dust. Rolling.com. Complete it. You don't have to clean your entire life at once. You don't have to close every open loop in a day. Just choose one. Any one. Complete it, not half-heartedly, not as an afterthought, but with commitment. Give it the respect of closure, and then step back and notice what that does to you. Notice the pride of having completed something. That feeling, little as it may be at first, is the germ of change, because the one who finishes what they begin is one in a million. Not because it's complex, but because it's difficult, because it asks you to fight against the gravity of distraction. To prioritize depth over newness, to be unsettled long enough to get something done. But then you do, and you start to believe in yourself differently. And that trust built in the dark times when you're alone becomes the bedrock for everything else you will create. So begins. More importantly, complete. Let that be your measure. Let that be how you move through the world. One whole thing at a time. 7. Reflect every evening. We rush too often from day to day without stopping. We stumble from dawn till dusk with no clear idea of where we made progress or where we lost it. Days run together, and in their running something essential is lost: perspective. Without reflection, your time is a loop rather than a ladder. You repeat the same thoughts, the same mistakes, the same habits, without ever really knowing them. But if you will sit for a few minutes each night, 5, even 2, to be still and reflect on your day, the cycle is broken. You turn memory into meaning. Start simply. No grand ritual is necessary. You don't require incense or music or pages of journaling. You only need to be truthful. Sit down in a quiet place. Allow the day to sink into your mind. Then ask yourself, softly yet clearly, where did I arrive today with strength? When was I brave, patient, fused, kind? These are the ones you want to recall. Not for ego, but for understanding. When you know what you're doing right, you do more of that. You get a sense of what failure looks like to do what you value. Then address the tough questions. Where did I fail? When did I talk out of frustration? When I could have stopped first? When did I step back? When I could have moved forward? When did I numb rather than feel? These aren't times to shame yourself. They're times to learn. Because if you can see your fumbles with honesty rather than judgment, they lose their weight and become tools instead. They reveal to you what still needs your work, where your effort lies. You no longer replay errors. You learn from them. That's how you grow. And last, ask yourself this: what am I thankful for? Gratitude is not some mushy activity. It's a means of retaking happiness. Even on the most chactolic, tuggish days, there is something to be grateful for. A moment of conversation, a silence, a whiff of fresh air. Gratitude brings you back down to earth. It makes you remember that even in failure, there remains beauty. Even in failure, there remains value. This evening reflection is a bit like a farmer pacing his fields in the evening. He doesn't do it out of nostalgangle. He does it so he can know. He notices where the soil is fertile, where the crops have grown healthy, where the weeds have invaded. He doesn't loathe the weeds. He records them. He prepares. He adapts. And because of that, the next day is better than the previous one. That's the strength of reflection. It's not passive. It's preparatory. You don't simply recall your day. You construct your Tamar. When you do this consistently, you start to notice a change. You move differently. You're not merely responding to life. You're responding to it. You move with purpose. You speak with purpose. You start to create a life not simply on action, but on awareness. That clarity is your advantage. It makes you strong. It makes you smart. This exercise doesn't have to be flawless. Some nights you'll forget. Some nights you'll resist. That's fine. The assignment isn't perfection. It's presence. And presence only demands your attention, your willingness to see and learn. Even a single night of sinker looking can instruct you more than a dozen days of mindless routine. In time, this is almost like talking to yourself. A silent, earthy moment that retreats you home. Not to the self you were yesterday, but to the self you are becoming. Because every day you live has lessons. Every day has truth. But that truth will only be a part of you if you take time enough to listen. So when the day is over and the world demands nothing more from you, do this for yourself. Sit in the silence, ask the questions, collect the wisdom. And remember, clarity isn't something that happens when you're running forward. It happens when you're standing still long enough to see where you've been. That's how you rise. Not in dramatic gestures, but in quiet bravery to look back, learn and move forward again. 8. Give without expectation. The world is loud with messages of truth. From the moment you're old enough to understand how things work, you're taught to measure your effort, your time, your presence carefully. Only give when there's something to be gained. Don't offer too much unless there's a clear return. Keep score. Guard your energy. Make sure everything adds up in your favor. But that way of thinking may promise security. But it takes something from you. That's deeper trouble. Something stronger, because true greatness doesn't flower from calculation. It doesn't sprout in the fertile ground of self-preservation. It sprouts from generosity. Not the flashy spectacle kind. Not the attention-grabber kind. But the subtle, steady kind that freely gives without expecting anything in return. The smile you give to a stranger when you think nobody's watching. The pause you make to actually listen even when your day is packed. The kind word you say to someone who's holding on by a thread. These are tiny actions, perhaps, but they're also holy, they're seeds. And they take root, not always immediately, not always obviously, but in ways you can't even fathom. Like the way you can't even fathom. The thing is, you never quite know how far your generosity goes. One soft word could be what keeps someone from quitting. One unappreciated action could give someone a little faith again. You won't necessarily see the harvest it reaps. But that doesn't necessarily mean it didn't bloom. The world changes in quiet ways, and your place in it is greater than you realize. Not because of what you can do by yourself, but because of what you can create from others. We tend to think of success as something to be grasped and presses, a reward to be won, a mountain to climb solo. But the truth is that selfish success turns inward. It can seem shiny on the outside, but empty. It rings out with loneliness in the burden of lost connections. Real success during profound success is constructed upon progression, upon what you offer along the way, upon how many people you raise up, how many loads you lift, how many hands you take for the reaching while you're still rising. That's not to say you must march yourself. That's not to say giving everything until you're spent, but it does mean a change from what can I get to what can I give, not always, not without a struggle, but more often than you learn to. When you make that transition even slightly, something in you opens. You cease to move through the world with a clenched fist. You learn to walk with an open hand, and others notice. They don't necessarily tell you, but they feel it. Ask yourself each morning, who can I help today? Not for favors, not for credit, just because someone helped you once. Because no one did, and you know what that's like. Let your kindness be rooted in strength, not duty. When you give from an overflowing heart, you don't lose. You expand. You don't lose. You gain something you can't measure, because the free giving man is never actually empty. He fills up in ways that money and position can't account for. Heals up with connection, with meaning, with self-esteem. And in a jail that so often encourages you to keep those things for yourself, that kind of fullness is usual. It's strong, it's memorable. The irony is, when you release expecting return, life has a way of bringing things back to you anyway. Not always from the place you directed, not always on your timeline, but often when you need it most. That's not a transaction, that's grace, that's the universe, answering a pattern of goodness. And it really starts only when you decide to live, not merely for yourself, but also for the people who pass in and out of your life every day. So give something. Give your care, your kindness, your skill, your attention. Give a little extra than is needed. Be present when you might have been quiet. Give the best part of yourself, not only when it's easy, but when it requires something of you. That's when it matters. That's when it will matter. Expect nothing in return. Do it anyway. Do it because you can. Do it because at the end of the day, the burden you bear is lighter when someone else's load is too. Do it because it makes you better, not in the eyes of others, but in the little places inside yourself. And the days will go by and you will start to see something. Your life will be more complete, not from what you've accumulated, but from what you've rejuvenated. The road that you walk will appear richer, not because it's less difficult, but because you've made it valuable, not just to you, but to all those whose lives you've enriched along the way. This is how greatness expands. Not from taking, but from giving, not from getting more, but from giving freely. You are not here to tell what you receive. You are here to give. And in doing so, you will be more than successful. You will be significant, fine. Guard your thoughts like trees, and your brain is not a vessel for thoughts. It is the earth in which your entire life takes root. All the thoughts you think, all the emotions you nourish, all the ideas you consider are seeds. And like any earth, your brain doesn't know good or bad seeds. It will grow what you plant. If you let doubt, fear, resentment, and anger take root, they will reproduce. Gradually, insidiously, they will creep through your mind, strangling you with clarity, confidence, and purpose. If they keep going, unchecked, they will make your internal world small, tough, and infested with noise, but it doesn't have to go that way. You are not powerless against your thoughts. You are the gardener, the gatekeeper, the blacksmith at the crucible of your own mind. The power of your life is contingent on how you nurture what happens between your ears. You have to nourish your mind just as meticulously as you would feed your body. Feed it things that will sustain it, forge that inspire, quiet that rejuvenates, dialogue that provokes and broadens you, and just as crucial, You need to eliminate what rust gossip that brings you down. Complaining that leads to nowhere. The perpetual cycle of negative thinking dressed as realism. You are planting seeds every day, sometimes on purpose, sometimes by accident. The books you read, the people you hang out with, the news that you watch, they all count. Even your random thoughts, the ones that you don't vocalize, are creating your internal environment. So ask yourself, what are you planting for the future with what you let into your mind today? There is authority in that question, for it reminds you that your life does not just occur. It develops and folds in direct proportion to the thoughts you tend to. Think of a man who handles his mind like a forge. He does not just toss in HH. He puts in only what stokes the fire in the proper manner. He tends to it carefully. He understands that one misplaced element, one negligent distraction, can taint the entire process, and so he becomes intentional, discerning, consecrated. This is the sort of relationship you need with your own thinking. When unconditionally comes, label it, challenge it. Don't give it a crown just because it came ahead of time. When fear whispers all the ways you're going to fail, don't accept it as prophecy. Accept it as a test. Consider what drives your inner spirit and question whether it deserves the influence that's been assigned. For if left unbridled, these thoughts will determine your actions. And your actions, when repeated, become your identity. You are what you think. It's not a cliché. It's a reality carved into every aspect of your existence. What you focus on becomes the structure for how you perceive the world. Focus on bitter thoughts long enough, and the world starts to seem unfriendly. Focus on gratitude and hope, and you begin to see beauty even amidst hardship. The mind is a reflection, but it reflects only what you permit it to take in. This isn't about denial or acting like everything is fine when it's not. It's about defending the place where your life is being built. If your body were your home, you would not let poisons pour in every day. And yet we let our minds be filled with emotional poison and mental trash. News that only infuriates. Voices that only grumble. Echo chambers that stiff expand rather than inspire wonder. It is not innocent white noise. It's fire to the weeds that will take over your mind if left unattended. So start where you are. Clean the garden. Notice what thoughts have sprouted up unbidden. Pull out the ones that no longer benefit you. Not with shame, but with clarity. Plant better seeds. Good books, quiet reflection. Thoughts that stretch your spirit rather than shrink it. Even a few minutes of mindful thought each day can begin to rewire your mental soil. Be around indigenous who speak life, not noise. Individuals who challenge you to think more, to reach higher, to own your point of view, and be such a person to others. Guarding your mind isn't about solitude. It's about association with people and thoughts that build up, not tear down. Over time, this becomes a lifestyle, a mindset. You no longer believe every thought to be true, simply because it's loud. You start to tend to your inner girl with intention. You select stillness when the world screams. You select hope when fear tells you it's the only choice. You become good at sitting with yourself, long enough to understand what you actually believe. Not merely what you've been instructed, and in that process, you construct something indomitable. A mind that does not panic at every tempest. A life that does not perish when it goes awry. For you've done the work, you've plowed the ground, you've watched over the gates. You've nourished your mind with the sort of thoughts that construct a future to live. Guard your mind and you guard it all. Your peace, your vision, your strength, your life will always mirror the character of your inner world. Nurture it well, the rest will come.